It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. My apologies for this taking so long to get out the next episode, and a special apology to Aron Ra, who interviewed over a week ago. My apologies for taking so long to get this out, but of course, thank you for being on the show, which of course is the secret reveal that Aron Ra will be on the show a little later, and we'll talk about all kinds of fun things, including electric cars and evolution and other fun things. Other topics later in this show, we are going to talk. I have a little crypto rant, so maybe you'll enjoy that. Unless you are really into cryptocurrencies, then you won't enjoy that. I also have a nice segment on, oh my God, a hodgepodge of things. It's a follow-up on some of the bond segments I've done recently. It talks about inflation, interest rate changes. I talk about tips, treasury, inflation-protected securities, commodities, bonds, interest rates. Oh my, so many things. So hopefully that gives you some, I don't know, follow-up and or new information and thoughts on what I think about stuff, because a lot of people have been contacting me, which I'm delighted that you do, but I don't want to explain it to every single person anew, so I put a bunch of stuff together in that segment. So hopefully you will enjoy that. One of the other fun things going on in my life, just to overshare a little bit too much, we are in the process of remodeling the kitchen, and it's finally actually started. And my wife is amazing at picking out things that go together. This door goes with this knob and this tile on the floor or whatever. And I'm perfectly happy to let her choose, and she often likes my input. And I hate choices like this. So we've spent a lot of time, gone to different stores to pick out everything, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing because her skills for decorating and picking colors and patterns and stuff is amazing. So I have full confidence that it's going to be amazing. This morning, her brother and our nephew came and spent 4 hours taking apart the kitchen. So where there once was a kitchen is now a refrigerator and some ugly walls, because all of the base cabinets are gone, all of the upper cabinets are gone, the countertop is gone, all of that, the dishwasher, the sink. The only thing that's still, the range is gone. The only thing that's still there is the refrigerator. So we can keep food cold, but we're going to have some fun and challenging and exciting times coming up and figuring out how to eat. And in a day or two, the floor comes out, the tile gets removed, and then a pantry with a big door on it. It's like a giant door. I hate it. That's all going to come out, and they're going to have to fix the wall behind it, and then they're going to have to clean up the walls and put in a whole new tile for the floor for the kitchen and the laundry room, which is next door. Our laundry room is between the kitchen and the garage. Works out okay. And then things start getting put back, and the cabinets will be done hopefully by this time next week. The cabinets get put in, the countertop gets put in. Oh my goodness, this is going to be weeks in the process, but I'm sure it's going to end up with a kitchen that's much nicer, more streamlined, and much, much more beautiful. So I'm very excited about all that. Other fun news in the last couple of weeks, I don't even know if I mentioned this, I just refinanced my cars. Now, regular listeners know I often talk about don't buy a new car. Well, that's the standing advice still. Generally, for most people, that's the right advice. Do not buy a new car. If you need a car, you buy a new to you, used, replacement car. But if you are on schedule to retire when you want, if you are saving enough, and if you're lucky enough to make enough, and you want to buy a new car, that's cool. My current recommendation, because interest rates are so phenomenally low, is to stretch out the car loan, just like your home loan, as long as possible. When we bought our RAV4 Prime, I guess it's been like 5 or 6 months now. Was that? Yeah, it was last year because it was on my taxes. Maybe late October, early November of last year, we bought the RAV4 Prime. And when we were in the dealership, I just said, just run it through Toyota. Toyota gave us a reasonable rate, but it wasn't a great rate. And I figured I'd redo that. Contacted my credit union, and it became a big hassle. And I just set it aside and did other things. Well, it turns out our local bank, First Midwest Bank, which actually I quite like as a bank, which I don't like a lot of banks. First Midwest Bank I kind of like. They had a special on car loans, and so we were able to materially reduce the interest rates on the RAV4 Prime and the Bolt that I bought 2.5 years ago. And the net effect is that for these two cars, we're now going to pay $100 less per month for, I think I refinanced them both to 72 months. So for 6 years, we're going to pay $100 less per year for 6 years. You can figure out $100 per month times 12, $1,200 for 6 years, $7,200 less that we're going to pay for interest. That's pretty cool. The other thing that's amazing is because the interest rate is lower, each payment pays more on principal and less on interest. Even if your payment amount per month was the exact same, if you use a lower rate, you pay more principal and less interest. And so the total savings of interest on these two cars is about another $5,000 to $7,000. So by refinancing these two cars, which it may not be in your best interest to buy a new car, depending on your financial situation, but we're going to save $7,000, give or take, on payments, plus another $7,000 on inflation. Or not inflation, interest. Oh my God, too many I words. And of course, you might ask to yourself, you might ask me, say, Phil, you have money. Why don't you just fucking pay for the car? You're right. I could fucking pay for the car. But as I've given in previous examples, if you have a car that's new for $40,000, if you put next to nothing down, you're going to have to pay interest. But that $40,000 you can then invest in the stock market. And theoretically, on average, and there never is an average year, you could make 10%. So that $40,000 could make you $4,000. And now you have $44,000. So I end up making considerably more money by investing the money that I could have used to pay for the car and borrowing the money now at about 3%. So if you have reasonably good credit, if you already have a car loan, just think about checking with your local bank or some other company that maybe can give you a lower interest rate loan on your car or cars. It might save you money and be worth the little bit of extra hassle you had to do to go do that. So, also because the show is already long and because I'm already behind, I am not going to have any Robert Greene Ingersoll segments this week. This episode, I guess, I can't say week. This episode, I may keep adding them in future episodes. If you like them, send me an email. If you don't like them, send me an email. But of course, if you want the content for your own, you can get it at the Center for Inquiries store. Just look up Center for Inquiries, CFI, Robert Greene Ingersoll, and you can buy the CD. And there's also now a link on that page where you can download, after you've bought the CD, you can download the MP3s and put them on your computer. I'm going to see one more time if I can convince them to get it loaded at someplace like Amazon, where many, many more people can find it and download it, because absolutely phenomenal content from Robert Greene Ingersoll 110, 120, 130 years ago, something like that. Absolutely staggering, his analysis of religion and God and Jesus and the Bible and all that stuff. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to go on with the other segments of the show. I know you're going to enjoy it.
And they told me the story all about this guy named Lehi who lived in Jerusalem in 600 BC. Now, apparently, in Jerusalem in 600 BC, everyone was completely bad and evil, every single one of them, man, woman, child, infant, fetus. And God came to Lehi and said to him, "Put your family on a boat and I will lead you out of here." And God did lead them. He led them to America. I said, "America? From Jerusalem to America by boat in 600 BC? And they said, yes. Then they told me how Lehi and his descendants reproduced, and over the course of 600 years, there were two great races of them, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And the Nephites were totally, totally good, each and every one of them. And the Lamanites were totally bad and evil, every single one of them, just bad to the bone. Then, after Jesus died on the cross for our sins, on his way up to heaven, he stopped by America and visited the Nephites. And he told them that if they all remained totally, totally good, each and every one of them, they would win the war against the evil Lamanites. But apparently somebody blew it, because the Lamanites were able to kill all the Nephites. All but one guy, this guy named Mormon, who managed to survive by hiding in the woods. And he made sure this whole story was written down in reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics chiseled onto gold plates, which he then buried near Palmyra, New York. Well, I was just on the edge of my seat. I said, "What happened to the Lamanites?" And they said, "Well, they became our Native Americans here in the U.S." And I said, "So you believe the Native Americans are descended from a people who were totally evil?" And they said, "Yes." Then they told me how this guy named Joseph Smith found those buried gold plates right in his backyard. And he also found this magic stone back there that he put into his hat and then buried his face into. And this allowed him to translate the gold plates from the Reformed Egyptian into English. Well, at this point, I just wanted to give these two boys some advice about their pitch. I wanted to say, okay, don't start with this story. I mean, even the Scientologists know to start with a personality test before they start telling people all about Xenu, the evil intergalactic overlord.
I'd like to take a moment, just a couple of minutes, to talk about cryptocurrencies. I'm not going to do a full review or re-examination of them. I think I said most of what I wanted to say back in late 2017. Episodes 242 and 243 were both about an hour long on just one subject, Bitcoin. And I did a lot of research and a lot of studying. And I know a lot of people think I'm lost my mind or crazy or I'm missing out on the next big thing. Okay, I'm cool with that. I'm willing to take the chance of missing out on the next big thing to not get fucked. That's me. You know, if you want to throw the dice and do Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, that's up to you. I see it as gambling. I don't see it as investing. And of course, someone will tell me, "Well, Phil, I bought Bitcoin at $6,000 and now it's worth $60,000, which it's not worth $60,000 anymore at the time of this recording. I made 10 times the money. Isn't that a good investment?" That's a good return, perhaps. I mean, if you bet on a horse that pays 10 to 1, and you bet $6,000 on the horse, and the racetrack gives you $60,000 as your winnings, and you ask me, does that make it a great investment? No, it's still fucking gambling. You bet on a horse, the horse won, it paid you. You bet on a cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrency succeeded, or the price went up during the time period in which you held it, and you got more money out than you put in. That means you won. You won that bet. It doesn't mean that it's investing. And cryptocurrency has an additional problem, is that so far, the United States government hasn't seen it as an investment. So it's not governed by the rules of investing, which allows people like Elon Musk to pump Bitcoin after they bought some to drive up the prices so they could make a profit. I think this is pure market manipulation. and it should be illegal. But since it's not an actual security regulated by the SEC, that's probably not going to happen. And of course, a couple of weeks later, Elon, who knows everything about money and how it works, according to his own tweets, where he said, "You ever heard of PayPal?" Okay, guy, that's nice, whatever. Apparently, he did not know, and or the board did not know, because whoever approved taking Tesla cash that was provided by the shareholders in buying more shares so that Tesla could succeed with its vision of creating a system for electric cars that can drive all over and not create as much pollution for our environment. Somehow they bought $1.5 billion of Bitcoin. And then 2 weeks later, Elon announces, "Oh, wait a moment. Well, guess we didn't realize that Bitcoin is the single most destructive and wasteful thing possibly ever created by humankind. It is creating an incredible demand and in some places an unbearable strain on electrical grids and creating pollution for what? For next to nothing. It doesn't, it's just so frustrating. I don't see the value in it. I think that Bitcoin specifically is inversely scalable. If it starts to be used for a lot of purchases, the system cannot handle it. Part of the blockchain is the block, and the block limits the number of transactions that can happen in any 10-minute time period. If more activity would occur, your transaction will not be settled within 10 minutes. It might be 20 or 30 or 50 or 80. It might be 80 blocks later, a day or two. This has happened already in the past, and it will probably happen again. And it might just happen at the moment where the prices go into free fall, and you will not actually be able to get out because there is no market maker. There is no one who is going to guarantee that your trade is going to go through. And there is a possibility that it could have catastrophic one-day drops. And when you want to go sell, you're going to have to put in your order and wait for it eventually to settle in an upcoming block. Now, you can pay extra money, $10, $20, $100, $200 to make your transaction go sooner in the line. But if there's a run on Bitcoin and everybody wants out, those fees could skyrocket to the point where it's not even worth it for a lot of average people who just have a coin or a fraction of a coin to get out effectively. So definitely some problems there. I got sent an article which inspired this whole conversation from a listener. The website is called Futurism. The title of the article is "Blockchains Were Supposed to Be Unhackable. Now They're Getting Hacked." And it details quite a few different stories and examples of what some of the problems are. And if you're really into blockchain technology and its hackability and how this affects cryptocurrency, go check out the article and read it for yourself, because I'm just going to cover a couple of ideas here. One of the examples that they gave here is that somebody was able to hack into Ethereum's classic network and rewrite part of the blockchain, the historical ledger. The blockchain is a shared ledger. Somehow they were able to rewrite that and come away with essentially $1.1 million in Ethereum that they then sold. And it created what is called a double spend. So it's like I go to a store and I spend $10. And then I go to another store and I spend the exact same $10. How does one do that in currency, in paper form? You make a photocopy. Well, obviously much more advanced than that, but you make a copy of the money. Clearly something that's illegal. And one of the things that blockchain needs to be able to do is assure everybody that that's not possible. Because if your coins can be spent twice or 3 times or 4 times, then there's absolutely no control and no system in place to prop up the value in any way. Not that I think that there's even value there in the first place, but the whole thing could fall apart if this happens regularly, and if that hack cannot be undone or solved or prevented from happening again. It is a terrible thing, and anyone who is into cryptocurrency should be really worried. And if you have a lot of money in cryptocurrency and you made a lot of money, awesome. Now is the time to get the fuck out. Just saying, something to think about. Another thing that they had here is that, and this is something I talked a little bit about with blockchain 3.5 years ago, or Bitcoin, I can't use my words, Bitcoin 3.5 years ago. It's a bit of software code that can be changed. And about 4 years ago, Bitcoin split off and had a schism where some people thought the block should be bigger, and they created Bitcoin Cash. And so there was one cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and the next day there was Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, and the total value of the two combined was worth more, dramatically more than just Bitcoin. So how does that happen? Money generally doesn't just come out of thin air. And a lot of people that buy cryptocurrencies are concerned that the government, and most people I talk to, the U.S. government, can print more money, and that's a problem. Well, when Bitcoin split into Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, that's exactly what happened. They not only created a new coin with new rules, a different size block, but money in total was created overnight. So if you're worried about the U.S. government increasing it 10 or 20 or 40% over a year or two, creating 20 or 30 or 40% overnight should really freak you the fuck out. So I don't know why this is not seen. But the rules can be changed by a vote. And the people that get to vote are the people who are doing the most computer work per the program, the most hash work. I don't want to get into that because I'm going to get to the edge of my computer understanding. But if someone controls 51% of the computer processing that's applied to a given cryptocurrency, unless there's some rule within that software that prevents them, they can change the rules. They just have a vote. They can come together and change the currency that you are using, a shitty currency at that, but a currency that you are using, and the game is changed in an instant. And I don't know if there's any policies or requirements that they notify you, but it changes, and what you thought you owned, you no longer own that. You own something different. And that is called a 51% attack. That's probably not going to happen that way with Bitcoin, and probably not with Ethereum or the other names that you've heard, but there's something like 3,000 or 4,000 of these things now. And some of them are very, very, very small. And someone could spend real money on computer hardware and take over dominance of a smally traded, lightly traded, small cryptocurrency, and get 51% of the power of the voting rights, the ability to change the program, and they change it and they make a whole bunch of money, and everyone else just gets stuck with next to nothing. So these things are out there. They have problems. So my negative position on cryptocurrency holds. Do not own it. Do not buy it. If you already own it, sell it. If you bought it at a really low price and now it's a really high price, that's great. You made a lot of money. You won that bet. Enjoy it. But it's not investing. It's I had to finally concede that it is a currency. It's a shitty currency. As an example, who wants to spend $20 on a pizza and buy it with Bitcoin if that amount of Bitcoin next year might be worth $100 instead of $20? So you don't want to spend it. So a currency that increases in strength at a very rapid rate will encourage you to never spend it. So if the vast majority of holders think it's going to go up in value, up, you're never going to use it. So it's not an effective currency. On the contrary, if the price can go from 60,000 to 42,000, 43,000 in a few days, if you're selling pizzas, you also don't want to take cryptocurrency because now you're in the currency business, and that's the price changes is more important than the profit margin you do or do not make in your pizza. So you don't want to accept cryptocurrency. So you don't want to spend it if you own it. You don't want to accept it if you are selling something else. It creates a problem, a lot of problems, and that can be dramatically enhanced when the time to process your transaction becomes days, because what you're going to eventually get may be different than what you thought you were going to get. It just all falls apart. Anywho, I'm just rambling. Thought you might like that. Check out that article in Futurism if you're into it. And I'm going to wrap this up and take a little pause. The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
This Investing Skeptically segment is a time-sensitive one. Some of my topics are. Some kind of are good for years, but this one is more precise, late May, early June of 2021. I'm just going to kind of prattle on here a little bit about inflation possibilities, interest rate increases, bonds, Treasury inflation protection securities, how to combat inflation, commodities, I think kind of all. I'm not sure the exact structure this will take, so I'm just going to kind of rattle on. It's got a lot of questions about some of the recent episodes on bond funds, which is fantastic. If you have questions, you can email me, Phil@Polaris Financial Planning. If I don't get back to you, maybe it went to my junk mail, maybe I got slammed that day and I got set aside and I didn't get back to you, so I'll apologize in advance. If you don't hear from me within a week, you are free to email me again. I won't take offense by that at all. The main gist of the bonds is that they are there to protect you in case this stock market takes a big dump. If the stock market goes down by half and you need money in the next few years, that's the primary purpose of the cushion. Now, bonds can also make money, at least historically they can, but right now that's really hard to do. Good, safe bonds make close to nothing, maybe 1%. And if interest rates go up, those really safe bonds might make net zero or net minus 1%, which is a real bummer, but they're not moving around a lot. A lot of technical, detailed questions and some very well thought critiques also from some listeners. So thank you for all of that. For almost everybody, the gist that you need to take away from the previous bond discussions is that right now we are in a position where the bonds are what they kind of say in the biz, a store of value, which means if the market goes down, they're not going to go down. And that's primarily done with really high quality short-term bonds. You can use U.S. government bonds, you can use corporate bonds, you can use all kinds of well-rated, highly rated short-term bonds. You want to look for years to maturity of 2 to 3, no more than 5, with the exception of Ginnie Mae's, because they're kind of quasi-federally backed and they respond to interest rates a little differently, but, still can have problems. And in your cushion, I want, give or take, 75% of your cushion in this kind of really safe, really short-term bond funds. I gave out a couple of specific bond funds last week. I'm not going to readdress those things, but people also ask, well, can I use Fidelity funds? Can I use Schwab funds? You can use whatever you want. I like the funds that I recommended, but if you've gotten some really short-term, high-quality bond funds that are kind of index-ish at Fidelity or Schwab or T. Rowe Price or some other place that you want to use, that's perfectly fine. Just keep an eye on the costs because all that stuff does matter. One of the things that someone pointed out to me is that one of the bond funds that I recommended, I said it was an index fund, and apparently it's not. I don't know how I got that idea in my head. I'd like to think that it used to be classified as an index fund by Vanguard, and now it's just not. Or I missed something many years ago, and I've just stuck with that fund. The expense ratio is still phenomenally low, And maybe they're not calling it an index fund anymore because with a bond fund with an average maturity of 3 years, that means on an average year, you're going to sell at least a third of that stuff for whatever reason, maybe even half as the portfolio turns over. So, I mean, if you bought stocks, you could have 2 or 3 or 4% turnover. But if you're buying bonds that are all coming due with an average maturity of 3 years, on average, you're selling 33% of them every year. And there might be a little extra turnover to make some tweaks and adjustments for cash coming in or cash going out or changing in allocation mixes of some kind. So maybe Vanguard didn't feel comfortable calling that an index anymore. So I don't know why that is. It doesn't really bother me because if you go to Fidelity and you buy a managed bond fund that has a 0.1 or a 0.2 expense ratio, whether they call it indexed or not, they're in a short-term bond fund, they're going to have a lot of turnover because that's what it is. That's just how it behaves. So that doesn't bother me other than the fact that I called something an index that apparently doesn't change my recommendations, but that's some thoughts about that. In reference to the other 25%, the 3 things that I recommend, and I'm still comfortable with that, is Total International Bond Fund, Emerging Market Bond Fund, and U.S. High Yield, aka junk bond funds. And those might suddenly make 5%. They might suddenly lose 5%. So that's the riskier part of the cushion of the bond portfolio. And it might be that one of those funds is the one that you end up taking money out of if everything else goes down. That's when we have this variety of different kinds of investments. And again, if you want to get those somewhere else other than Vanguard, that's cool. Again, keep an eye on the costs. Very, very important, especially when bond funds might be earning, 0.5% or less. If your expense ratio is 1%, you're going to be losing money every year, kind of just as a practical effect of the expense ratios. So to follow up on that, there is I don't know if I want to call it a meme, a rising conversation thing, a news item that a lot of people have been watching. And I would remind you that watching random YouTube videos about investing can be a very dangerous way to learn about investing, which is why I have the books that I recommend. But a lot of people have sent me emails, and we've had some conversations about inflation. Inflation is now looking like it's bigger than it's been for 20, 30, 40 years, maybe. And the Fed has apparently indicated they're going to be okay with a little bit higher inflation. Now, when I'm talking about inflation, I'm talking about going from a normal 2 to 3% range to an abnormal 4 to 5% range. It matters, but it's not crazy high. At least that's not the intent. If it all runs away, okay, fine. Maybe I missed something. Maybe they missed something. And part of it might be the fact that we had very poor economic growth for a year or so because of COVID, and we're just kind of making up for that lost ground, plus, the effects that one would normally expect in 2021. So a little bit higher inflation for a few calendar quarters or maybe even an entire year probably is not going to change anything, and probably shouldn't change anything that you do with your investments. One of the best places ever to invest as a hedge against inflation is stocks, the stock market. We've talked about how to manage that and what funds to use or what I recommend. In other segments, I'm not going to go into that detail now because I'm going to talk a little bit more about inflation. But stocks are a fantastic way in the long run to take care of inflation. The goal, of course, is your stock investments make more than inflation goes up every year and you build wealth. That's cool. If you're closer to retirement, you have part of your money in the cushion and the interest rates are low, really low. And if you're making 1 or 2% in bonds and inflation is 4 or 5%, technically, that part of your portfolio is falling behind. That's why you have the other part of your portfolio in stocks to go ahead. So as long as your overall portfolio is growing more than inflation, again, it doesn't really matter that much. But people have asked, Phil, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And so now I'm going to go over a couple things that I am not recommending these things. So I wanted to get that clear. It's one of those things that, like, for example, when I talk about target date funds can be suboptimal performance, every once in a while I'll have someone contact me and say, I have this target date fund. You just said they were awful and I should sell it. No. I sometimes think you can do better. Maybe in your case, you can't do better and the target date fund might be the right thing for you. In some cases, the next couple of topics might be right for you, but I'm generally not blindly suggesting or recommending to anybody listening. This is where I put in, this is not specific investment advice. Consult with your own financial advisor. It's something to think about, but at this point, I'm still leaning towards the idea that they aren't going to work. So I'm not recommending them. I'm not doing it with clients. So, but everyone's asking, so I'm going to talk about it. But I wanted to have this little preamble here to tell you that I'm going to talk about it because maybe hundreds or thousands of people are listening that might want to send me an email and ask me about it. And you can just hear it here, and I don't have to do this 20 more times. So the first thing that I'm not recommending is a thing called tips. They've been around for a long time, and sometimes tips are amazing, and sometimes they might not be amazing. TIPS stands for Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. If you want to read a little bit more about these, of course, the internet is full of information, but I recommend that you start with Investopedia, kind of like Wikipedia. Investopedia is a great place to get what I think is pretty good investment advice or educational information. And on tips, they have a cute little video and some nice descriptions and a whole bunch of links. And it's not tied to a specific investment company that's trying to sell you anything. It's just providing you information. So Investopedia is a great place to go. So TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, they sound fantastic because if interest rates go up, they protect you from the interest rates because the face value of the bonds, the actual value of the bonds. So let's see, if you buy a TIPS bond, I guess, is it still TIPS? Yeah, because that's securities. You buy one TIPS. It sounds so weird in English. For $1,000. If you buy it for $1,000 and inflation is 20%, next year the face value of that bond would be $1,200. Keep in mind the adjustments are made, I think it's twice a year. And the IRS has decided that the additional increase in value, face value of your TIPS, shall be counted as income. So if your bond, $1,000 bond, becomes a $1,200 bond, the IRS says that $200 is going to be counted as additional income earned in that year, so that $200 you are going to be taxed at your marginal tax rate, thereby losing 25 to 35 to 40% of your gains because you have to pay taxes on it. So that's one thing. That's a weird thing. TIPS, like any other bond, by the way, are also affected by changes in interest rates. So if you buy a short-term fund that only has short-term TIPS, you may never get the benefit if interest rates go up. If you buy a longer-term fund that has, on average, 8 or 10-year Treasury protected securities, if interest rates go up, the value of the bonds they might get adjusted up with inflation, but then they get adjusted back down when you want to go sell it, because nobody wants your bond because it pays too little as far as interest rate. The other thing that's odd about Treasury inflation protected securities is right now the yield, depending on what day you look at it, is between minus 1.5 and minus 2.5%. So you're up against it just to start. So if inflation is tame or below whatever the trigger is for the securities to go up, you might lose 2% of your money every year going forward. So if you buy a TIPS fund and it's interest is negative 2%, and you own that for 10 years, if inflation never appears, you might lose 10, 15, 20% of the value because its interest rate is negative. And so that's kind of weird and unexpected. So if we have 1 year or 2 years where the inflation is a point or 2 or 3% higher than what we'd normally expect, you could actually protect yourself against inflation with tips. But if interest rates go up and you have to pay tax on the gains in face value and it's not that big of an inflation, then you could still end up net less money than what you started with, even though you were kind of sort of protected. So that's why they're in the category of I'm not recommending them. Sometimes in the past, when they had really generous interest rates, they were kind of magical because you got high interest rates, you're protected from crazy inflation, and if interest rates go down, the bonds will appreciate just like any other bond. But right now, again, with interest rates really low and the interest rates on tips being negative, I'm just not feeling it. If it's something you really want to do, it wouldn't bother me, I guess, if you wanted to put 5 or 10% of your cushion in tips, but I can't recommend it. Another thing that's often cited as a hedge against inflation, which I think is one of the most brilliant marketing phrases that has ever came up, especially in reference to gold. Gold is a hedge against inflation. What the fuck does that mean? That means theoretically, in the long run, if inflation is around 3% year after year after year for decades, the appreciation in gold and or all commodities is about 3%. Historically, in the long run, gold and or all commodities, on average, collectively, make about inflation plus maybe an extra 0.5 to 1% in return for the investor, which is not much. Now, if inflation was 20% per year and the gold only returned 20% per year, that's kind of cool. It'd be a hedge against inflation. But particularly in the U.S., where inflation is historically quite low, low single digits, the benefit that you're going to get from commodities is likely small, and you're not getting the growth that you would have generally in stocks, and you're not getting the protection and the safety and the reliability that you would get in short-term bonds. So, commodities also have a very high volatility. So they have returns like bonds, really safe bonds, a couple percent, but they have volatility like stocks. I don't like that mix, but again, it's something you could buy. A lot of advisors will recommend it. Maybe they know something that I don't know. Maybe it's just a difference of professional opinion, or maybe they think that by recommending 20 different types of investments, you're more diversified, which would be true, but does it make you more money in the long run? I don't think it does. So commodities, one of the big problems with a lot of things that are commodities, gold, cattle, pork bellies, copper, whatever it is, often it's very expensive to physically own those things. So if you want to own cattle, literally owning cattle, you have to feed them. You have to keep them warm in the winter. You have to keep them cool in the summer, unless they're the kind that can handle a lot of heat. You have to give them water. So there can be a lot of expenses involved with physically holding that commodity, like oil. Where are you going to hold it? You're not going to put it in your house. It has to be stored somewhere. Someone wants storage fees for your oil or your gold or your copper. So most people don't actually own the commodities and hold them in their own possession. So if you don't do that, then one thing that you could do is you can use futures and puts and calls and options and trading, and that drives up the expense. So you could end up actually being right, but then the expenses of being right are greater than the effect of being right, and you still don't make any money. The third thing, of course, is you can own stock in companies that deal with commodities. Well, if you're following my 6-part, what do I call it? The stock market, U.S. market matrix that I call it, where I use the 6 different funds. Virtually every, I'll leave myself a little wiggle room, virtually every stock that trades in commodities, you already fucking own it. So you're just not putting an emphasis on it, but you do own virtually all stocks, and therefore you virtually own all stocks and companies that deal with commodities. So you have them in your portfolio already. So having a commodities fund is something you could do. Its correlation with inflation, or what you're looking for in this case would be a reverse correlation, is not particularly strong in the short run. It's really good in the long run, but it's so tight with inflation that if inflation maintains a low return over a long period of time, so do you. So commodities can be really hard to own physically. They can be very expensive to own through futures, puts, calls, all kinds of fancy investment things. And it just, I don't know. I think about it. People challenge me on it. I love that they do, but I always keep coming down on the same side on this thing, which is basically you shouldn't have money specifically in a commodity fund or a commodity ETF. And all of those stocks you have already in the U.S. market matrix at a phenomenally low cost. So if that part of the market wins, you're going to get the benefit. If some other part of the market wins, you get the benefit there. So those are some thoughts on bonds, really conservative bonds, short-term bonds, bond allocation, follow-up from the last couple of episodes, inflation, tips, commodities. Oh my God, I can't believe I got all of this, and it's only like a 22-minute segment. So let's take a little break. We'll do something else and get on with the rest of the show.
Jesus says that he speaks in parables because the people, they just don't understand anything else. But the parables are often foggy and meaningless, and Jesus is snippy when even the disciples don't get them. He says to them, if you don't understand this parable, then how can you understand any parable? And are you incapable of understanding? I kept thinking, don't teach in parables then. It's not working. Even your staff doesn't understand them. Why don't you just say what you mean? Okay, so Jesus isn't so patient, and I think he picked a very ineffective lesson-giving technique, and he's angry most of the time, but that doesn't make him bad. It's just, wow, I really expected someone else. Some of the parables are not just foggy. To me, they're sort of offensive. Like in Luke, Jesus helps us understand God's relationship with humans by telling us a story about how God treats people the way people treat their slaves. They beat some more than they beat others. Okay, I know this was a different time and everything, and I really tried to keep that in mind as the Bible refers to slavery all over the place. And not only does it not say it's wrong, I mean, the Bible gives you advice about how you're supposed to keep your slaves and how slaves should behave obediently at all times to their masters. But I don't know, I guess I sort of thought the Son of God would say slavery was wrong. But no, Jesus does not say that. In fact, he uses slavery as an example of how God treats people. It was really hard to stay on Jesus' side when he started saying really aggressive, just hateful things. Like in Luke chapter 21, Jesus says that he is like a king who says, anyone who does not recognize me, bring them here and slaughter them before me. Or in John chapter 15, Jesus says, anyone who does not believe in me is like a withered branch that will be cast into the fire and burned. In Matthew, he says, I come not to bring peace, but a sword. And in Luke, he says, and if you don't have a sword, sell your clothes and buy one. Then Jesus just starts acting downright crazy. Like in Matthew chapter 21, when this fig tree doesn't have a fig for Jesus to eat, he condemns the fig tree to death. That's right, Jesus condemns a fig tree to death. Not a parable, by the way, just Jesus pissed off that the fig tree didn't have a fig for him to eat when he wanted one. Not exactly the Prince of Peace who taught us to turn the other cheek. And then there's family. I have to say that for me, the most deeply upsetting thing about Jesus is his family values. Which is amazing when you think how there's so many groups out there who say they base their family values on the Bible. I mean, he seems to have no real close ties to his parents. He puts his mother off cruelly over and over again. At the wedding feast, he says to her, "Woman, what have I to do with you?" And once, while he was speaking to a crowd, Mary waited patiently off to the side to talk to him, and Jesus said to the disciples, "Send her away, because you are my family now." Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell this exact same story, but Mark actually tells us why Mary was there to see Jesus. He says Mary came to see Jesus to restrain him, because the people were saying he's gone out of his mind. I kept thinking, yes, let's go get Jesus and get him some help.
As promised, everybody, it's time for the interview, and today I have with me Aron Ra. How are you today, sir?
It's all right. And yourself?
Pretty good. Having a great time. We had a beautiful day here in the Chicagoland area. Did get a little hot. It was almost 70.
A little hot, almost 70.
Yeah. Well,
okay. You're saying that because I live in Texas.
Yeah. Well, thankfully for us, the entire grid does not shut down when it gets below freezing.
Yeah. So in a few days, I bought a Jeep so that I could.
I saw.
So that I could go fossil hunting. And the reason I bought that was because last year I was in South Africa on a paleontological expedition, which I was really, really happy about. I spent 2 weeks trying to die in the desert while being largely unsuccessful in finding fossils. And we were looking for Permian therapsids, and I did find a cache of them, but only found fossils on one day out of the 2 weeks that I was there, which is very frustrating. I found a lot of them on that one day, but it was only one day.
It sounds like I've been tempted to take these 2-week-long vacations where you just chase tornadoes.
Well, I'm sure we'll see a lot of you then.
Yeah.
When you do that, because this is where they are.
Yeah.
Well, so when I was in South Africa, on the last day that we were there, somebody found a very large therapsid, a very large animal, let's say the size of a cow. And imagine something like in life, this thing would have looked something like a cross between a lizard and a dog. Not quite reptile, not quite mammal.
And the size of a cow.
Definitely transitioning, and the size of a cow. Yeah. So or at least a wildebeest. Yeah.
So now there's 2 more gaps.
So they find this thing, and it happens to be on the side of a hill, and it was a very hot day. I mean, it was something like 104, something like that. We've been out in it for 8 hours. Everybody's dog tired. We just want to go home and die. And we're living in this old farmhouse, like from try to imagine the way people lived in the 1800s. That's what this house was like. And so we find this thing, or this guy finds this thing, and he gets on the walkie-talkie that we all have as we're all wandering the desert alone, and summons us all over to help him with this huge fossil. And we decide that we can't get this all at once because it would take days to exhibit, and we're supposed to be back in Johannesburg the next day. So we decided that we were just going to take the head of this thing and then send another team out to get the rest of it, or come get the rest of it at another time. And the problem was that we had these 2 university-provided 4-wheel drives, and they're on street tires.
Oh.
So, yeah, they're 4-wheel drive, but what good does that do? We're 2 kilometers away from the closest that the 4-wheel drives could get to us, over rocks and hills, and so 6 of us have to carry this huge thing like on a stretcher, and we're all struggling, taking tiny baby steps where everybody has to take the tiny baby step together, and we have to go down this jagged rocky hill, and then through the sandy wash, and then back up this jagged rocky hill to go over the next hill, to go over a whole bunch more jagged rocks. And this is to finally, to like an hour or 2 later, we'll finally get to where the Jeeps are, and we'll be completely exhausted. We had to take like 3 breaks.
Wow.
Because you just taking these little teeny tiny baby steps and moving really slow with this great weight, and that was awkward. So I mean, I'm wishing that the 4-wheel drives could get to where we are. Now, this was a Permian deposit in a desert area that looks a whole lot like our own Texas Permian Basin, which, of course, is another Permian deposit. The terrain looks very similar. The only difference is that here in Texas, we don't have baboons. Other than that, it's basically the same thing.
I see. Well, I mean, it depends on how generous you want to be with the locals.
So I thought if I'm ever going to do this dig again, and I want to, if it's not going to be in South Africa, if I'm going to do it here in Texas, it would be in the Permian Basin, and I want a vehicle that will get all the way out to where that damn fossil was, because that was just ridiculous having all of us carry this big heavy thing like that.
Now, I understand you also took an EV adventure?
Oh, we did.
But what were you driving for that?
Oh, my wife bought a Kia Niro.
Okay.
Yeah, so all electric car, which quite a huge contrast from the thing that I have.
Right.
Which doesn't get real stellar mileage.
And you guys went what did you go 500, 1,000 miles?
1,000 miles each way.
1,000 miles each way, so 2,000 in total.
Yeah, so we went from Dallas to Phoenix and back.
And how'd that work out?
Well, we have a pretty good range on it, like 250 miles on a charge.
Yeah.
But we already understood that when you're going down the highway, depending on what modes you run and how many things you're running, you may not get all of the advertised mileage. So we knew to never be more than 80%, or
below 20%, 80% used.
Yeah, exactly. So we know we don't want to run out to anything close to our actual absolute range. We only want to go out to like 80% of our range,
right?
And make sure that there's a place to, and preferably not even that. We just stop more often, because the first 20 minutes can get you up to 80%. But if you want to get the whole 100%, well, then that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
So it's going to take exponentially longer. So just charge to 80 and then keep on down the road. Just stop more often.
Do you know what the charging rate maximum on that vehicle is?
We have never worked out what the how much money it costs.
Oh, I'm not worried about the money, but just, cars like mine, my Bolt has a maximum charging rate of 55 kilowatts.
Oh, maximum charge rate. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
No, I was.
It just took what it took.
We can charge with a fast charger, but we can't use the Tesla supercharger, so
Correct.
We can't charge like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife knows all the numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head. The one that we don't know, either of us yet, is what the cost is to run an electric vehicle on a road trip like that versus running a gasoline car.
Do you know were the meters that you used, were any of them charging by the kilowatt hour?
I'm sure they were. I just don't. I was trying to take the miles versus how much we charged or paid for each charge and try to work out dollars per mile so that I had something to compare.
Do you know what the average or the rated range for 1 kilowatt hour of energy is in that car?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
So I would guess 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, because my Bolt is 3.9 to 3.4, or 3.9 to 4.0, and it's a little smaller, a little lighter. And our RAV4 Prime, which has some batteries, it gets around 3 to 3.2, and it's bigger than the vehicle you're driving. So I'm just going to pick 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour of energy, and you probably were paying at high-speed chargers about 40 cents or less for high-speed.
Yeah, it was definitely less.
Yeah. So what do you think? 30 cents?
That would be a much closer estimate.
Excellent. So going on 30 cents, if you put 10 kilowatt hours in, it would be $3. And for $3, you would get about 35 miles of range.
Okay.
So that makes it really close to a car.
Yeah, I figured it would be on the road trips. It is comparable.
Yeah.
But when we're in town, though,
exactly,
we put it on sport mode and just leave it there, because why not?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go. I live in the east of Dallas, but I can go all the way to Fort Worth, which of course is west of Dallas, and it's like an hour away. But I can run errands all the way out to Fort Worth and back, and still have plenty of charge to do whatever, go downtown for that evening. We don't worry about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We charge the car like twice a week.
Well, if you get the charge at home, you might be paying 12 or 10 cents or less per kilowatt hour, and so
it's so cheap that it's not even, we don't even notice it on our electric.
Yeah.
I was looking for a difference, and there isn't one.
Our first electric vehicle, we switched to a thing that we have here, hourly billing, where we pay sometimes as little as 4 or 5 cents overnight in the summer. But in the afternoon, it can be 15, 20, 25 cents. So you got to be careful and plan. But because we switched to hourly billing, even with adding a full EV car, our net bill went down after adding the car.
And for those skeptics in the audience who might want to complain that, well, the way that we're charging this is still running on generators or what have you, we also switched our electric grid to all green.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah,
well,
so we had the option here in Garland that we can go off of strictly solar or solar and wind. So it's all renewable for us.
That's excellent. I actually, incidentally, not because of the electric car, but put in a large solar panel system on my house. And I do expect it to produce really close to 100% of my needs on an annual basis.
Very good.
So,
well, I would do that with this house too, but we don't intend to live here much longer.
Yeah, that makes a difference. Or if you you don't have full sun exposure, because you really need to have everything lined up right to make sure it works at great maximum.
We also, at this house, we have a lot of trees around, and so the one roof would get full time almost.
Yeah.
And that's all really all we need. We could put everything on one side of the house, and it would get sun virtually all the time.
Because it's amazing. I had no idea that in Chicago I could get 100% of what I need. I can only imagine what it's like in Dallas.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that other people don't. One of the things that really confuses me is how people will become advocates for the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
By deliberately blocking electric cars' access.
That is a thing. It's always a big truck, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, we pulled up to this hotel, and there's 3 chargers there, and there's 3 huge-ass dualies parked in those spaces. So I stood in the entrance of the hotel, looking intimidating, until one of these guys realized that, hey, there's an electric car sitting in the parking lot, not parked, just sitting there. My wife's sitting in it, and me glaring at whoever comes in or out.
See, one of the things I did to avoid that, I bought myself a 25-foot extension cable. And it's not like the green thing that you might lay in your lawn to run Christmas lights. I'm talking about a heavy-duty, I don't know what the gauge is, 4 or 6 gauge multi-wired cable that has the J1772 male on one end and female on the other end. It's just 25 feet long.
I don't know what exactly the dimensions are in the charger that we have, but it's really close to that. It's pretty long. So when we did our road trip, one of the times that we stopped was in a casino in El Paso, and they had like an RV park there. So we parked in the RV area and stayed the night in El Paso in the casino hotel.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, casino's not really my thing, but I used to live in Vegas for years. I just never saw the appeal of a casino.
It's funny because we're contemplating, conceptually, maybe 10 years down the road, of getting like a condo or a townhome in Vegas. We don't gamble, but I could go to a lot of shows.
Yeah. The shows can be worthwhile, but I'm more interested in the surrounding area. Yeah. I mean, there are some interesting things to do in Vegas, and I spent, back when we had a full Lake Mead, I used to be on the lake quite often when I was a kid. There's not much lake left.
No, there's not. So. Well, they used to call it the white ring around it, but now the white ring is kind of like the height of a skyscraper. It's getting pretty bad.
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem. So what else have you got? You still have the podcast?
Yes, and that's another thing. We signed up when I signed up for YouTube.
Yeah.
when YouTube contacted me, actually, because I had no idea about these things, YouTube contacted me many, many years ago now and said that, you're getting a lot of attention on your channel. Would you like to be a partner and actually make some money at it? And I didn't expect much, and I didn't get much. But what I was very surprised at, we did a charity telethon back around October, and we raised thousands of dollars for a homeless thing. So it was Atheists Helping the Homeless in Austin or San Antonio, one or the other.
Sure.
But we raised thousands of dollars for them, and when we moved that money over, it was the only thing that caused me to look at how much YouTube was telling me I was going to earn, because it was always about the same amount every month that I got. So that's what I thought it was. And then I started looking into the back analytics. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm supposed to be making this. Where did it go? So we're trying to calculate how much money we made off of super chats and such, and that's where I happen to find it. And it's so easy to find. It's only a click away. It's just I never bothered to look, and I feel so embarrassed about that now, because we found out that we were not going directly through YouTube. We were going through something else called a multi-channel network. And the purpose of this multi-channel network supposedly was that if I ever needed royalty-free music, I could get it from them, but I don't ever need royalty-free music, so the fuck am I paying you for? Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that.
Oh, you can swear on this channel. It's all good.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, so we found out that the multi-channel network was taking half of my income.
Ah.
Yeah, so we got off that as soon as we realized what that was, but this was years down the road. So I'm thinking, all the time we've been struggling financially for so many years, what could I have done with, more than $1,000 extra, every month?
Yeah, that's real money.
'Cause I had no idea they were taking that much. And so one month they took $3,000.
Wow. That's not so bad.
Now, this is when I'm raising money for charities and such. I'm like, well, why does this group have the charity money? Why are they having access to that? But
that's all fixed now.
Well, yeah, I'm hoping to get my first full paycheck from YouTube in at the end of the month or the beginning of this next month. Haven't gotten it yet, but it's just remarkable. And when you think about it, when you're really struggling, half your money, really?
That's a dirty dog trick, is what that is, man. It's there's another thing that you might want to look into. I don't know how it works yet, but people can make a spontaneous tip or donation if they like your content.
Yes, I do. I do have a PayPal set up for that purpose.
Ah, okay. Because I found a couple of the people who I watch for Italian videos. They'll have a little icon, and I can chip in $3 or $5 to thank them for making stuff that helps me learn what I want to learn. And people can do the same thing for you. Have you tried Patreon yet?
No, I'm on Patreon. That's
the main.
I get some money from YouTube, but that's not the primary income. The primary is Patreon.
And what is your Patreon address? So we can send
Patreon.com/ARONRA. And as I said, we've been on it for years, and it's always been tight. It's always been a struggle. I found out yesterday that there's a website somewhere that lists me as having a worth of $1 to $5 million.
Yeah, those things are funny.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how I'm worth $5 million. I don't have $5 million. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're a media influencer. That's how it is. And look at this. I'm at the Patreon site, patreon.com, Aron Ra, R-A, and you got a couple different levels here, and it's per video. And about how many videos a month are you making? A couple?
On average, I make 6 videos a month.
Okay.
And they will be, sometimes they're edited green screen kind of videos, which are my favorite to do.
Yeah.
I have to do a lot of research to come up with the scripts for those. I have to do a lot of laying out. And then what I really don't like is the recording part, where you're actually on camera, trying to get all this thing recorded. But once that's done, and I get to do the video editing, that's where I have fun. It's like painting. I'm delighted that I get to do this for a living.
Well, I just went to the YouTube channel because I maybe I haven't been here for a while. I see the phylogeny challenge. That's a classic.
Unanswered for 10 years now.
Yeah. 257,000 subscribers. Yeah, I think I made it past 1,000, and they turned on some stuff, and I was like, yeah, I don't care. But 257,000. That's nice, dude.
Well, thank you.
That's big enough where you can actually make money.
Barely.
Are you planning on another book?
Well, I'm working on one right now. I don't know how I'm going to publish it. I might just do an online publishing for the second one. That's going to be An Infidel Reads the Quran.
Oh, because no one's going to pick that up. It's just going to be self-funded?
I don't know. What I've got right now is I've got a whole series of blog posts where I've been reading one or two surahs at a time. And then and I will put in I'll compare different translations, English translations, and so to make sure that I get the meaning right. And then to make sure, again, double check that I've got the meaning right, I hold a video hangout with a handful of people, mostly apostates, who were raised in Islam and who speak Arabic.
Yeah.
And can tell me what the traditional interpretations are. Because the reason for that is if you grew up in Punjab, and you might be familiar with Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus. You don't know anything about Christians. So if somebody gave you a Bible, you could read that and you would never come to the idea that the serpent was supposed to be Satan.
Yeah. Without the proper advanced training of how to bend your mind, just handing the Bible to a fully functioning adult and having them read it, they're not going to come up with modern day Christianity. It's just so far removed from that, it's embarrassing.
So exactly. So you have to know that this is the traditional interpretation, and that when Isaiah is making fun of Babylonian astrology, you have to remember again. There's another interpretation that Christians think that how art thou fallen from heaven, Hillel bin Shahar. They're talking about Satan again. And again, the Bible doesn't say that. It doesn't even allow it, but that's the way Christians interpret it. So when I'm studying the Quran, there's a lot of things in there that don't make any sense to me. I would not understand the interpretations that they do. So I have to have them. And they understand some things very different. They'll have the same things that the Christians have, but they'll have it different. So Again, I need to know how they've interpreted it differently.
So is this kind of like fun, casual reading like a Harry Potter or a Dan Brown, or is this kind of a slog?
I will read just a few verses, maybe 1 to 5 verses, something like that, and then I'll have something to comment, and I'll make some note of something, and then I'll continue on to the next few verses. And sometimes there's a paragraph of things that I've got to say on what the hell the thing just said.
Yeah, that
was what I was expecting, because I was expecting the Quran to be a lot like the Bible.
Yeah.
It's not. Well, it's like the Bible if you got a Reader's Digest version of the Bible.
Right.
And you changed some stuff and got super repetitive.
So like the Book of Mormon.
It's like every surah says the same thing, every one of them. Unbelievers are going to burn in hell. Believe or else. And that's it. That's almost the summary of it. Hold on a second.
Yep, it's all good. Wow. Those are some vocal puppies.
Well, you should hear when they get started. Somebody brings a package up to the door. The big one goes off first, and he just goes berserk and starts smashing into the door, and then the other two go off, and one of them does a scream bark, which is just loud, piercing, awful, and then the other one gets into this yodeling thing that sounds like he's being electrocuted.
That's odd. Our neighbor has 3 dogs, 2 very big dogs. Very stout dogs. I don't know the breeds, but they look like they could really hurt you if they were inclined to do so. And they're just the nicest animals, and they'll come up to the fence, and you can kind of talk to them, and they tilt their head like they understand. But then when the little teeny dog comes out and starts yipping, they lose their shit. And I was like, there they are.
Hold on. I'm looking for a mute button right now.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. It's part of the part of the family. It's no big deal. The book that you have already written, Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. It's a few years old now.
I'd like to do a second edition.
I would too. I would like for you to do that.
There's 2 or 3 things in there because nothing ever comes out perfect the first time. And there's 2 or 3 things that I don't think are big errors, but when you find out something that is wrong, you want to go back and fix it.
Yeah.
And so there are 2 or 3 little things that I need to take care of in that.
Well, the thing
I don't know how much else I would update except for new information since then.
Yeah, you can do a 10 years later or 5 years later. I can't even remember how much time has passed. This book, in case for listeners, 2016, Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. It's Kindle, paperback. I got the audiobook version, and a very well-written book. I know you and I have talked about this before, but I want to make sure the listeners know that if you really kind of want to get up to speed on some of the BS of creationism, this is a really good book to listen to or read to kind of get up to speed on the crazy stuff. Mostly, this is aimed towards Christianity, but what Christians say and how phenomenally and basic things that they could Google and spend 2-3 minutes and prove to themselves that what they're saying is false. But that's what this book contains.
Yeah, I've written a couple of articles that were much more in depth than what was in the book, and so I'd love to include some of that too. I mean, like, it often comes up, what an atheist is. People want to argue different perceptions of that, and I've written what I think is the most comprehensive treatise of that anyone's ever written on it, and I'm often challenged on the definition of faith too. That somehow for evangelical Christians, or New Testament in the time that it was written, somehow faith means something different. No, it really doesn't. And here's the treatise that proves that. It's a long read, it's just a blog post basically, but I mean it's like several hundred words, and it covers and proves the point.
And where could one of my listeners find that stuff?
Well, that's on the blog on what is currently Patheos. So we call it Reason Advocates.
Excellent. So they can go and find those things. Of course, if someone wanted to email you directly just to get a link from you or to invite you to a conference, where can they reach you?
I get a lot of messages as it is.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, if they're motivated enough, they'll find you, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard to find the email address. It's just like I just get so many messages already, and so much of it is crank.
Yeah.
I mean, why would somebody want to send me 18 paragraphs? And it's always, I mean, you press the space bar after you push the period before you begin your next sentence. Come on.
Are you a one space or a 2 space person?
Well, I learned. I was originally doing 2 spaces habitually, and I taught myself. In the course of writing the book, in fact, I had written half of it with 2 spaces, and then was told that I needed to change it to 1. I'm like, how am I going to change this conditioning? But I did. I went back and fixed it all. So
man, I don't know. I don't know if I can. I've done 2 space for so long. I don't know.
It turned out to be easier than I thought it would be. Another thing that I thought would be impossible is driving on the other side of the car, especially with a stick shift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, driving through rural Ireland with shifting with my left hand.
Yeah.
5 minutes, you're down.
And some of the roads there, if I understand correctly, are kind of thin. So when you get oncoming traffic, it can be a little spooky.
Yeah, you just remember to veer the other way than you would usually do.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Just look at what's coming at you and avoid it.
Yeah, one thing that was important for me to learn driving in the British Islands was you need to slow down for roundabouts.
Yeah. Oh, that because it's different. Yeah. Who has left-sided? It's the United Kingdom and Australia. Is that it? New Zealand too?
And Japan.
Japan. Okay.
And there's somebody else, I think.
Yeah, I know that we've toyed.
I've driven in Australia and New Zealand.
We've toyed with the idea of driving a car in Italy, but I haven't driven a stick shift in like 30 years. so that's all they drive there. I don't even know if you can get an automatic. So maybe I could if I searched hard enough, but
it's funny. I didn't want to drive a stick shift when I was a kid when I got my first car because I wanted something easy. Why would I want to learn something difficult? But the first car that I got was my dad's truck, and it was a 3 on the tree.
Okay.
Remember those?
No, if it's stick, no, because I didn't. Other than a few friends' cars, I never really drove stick.
Yeah, the column is the shifter is on the column. It's just like your turn signal.
Oh, okay.
But it's the actual shifter. So it was a weird configuration. So you had to make strange movements when you shift this thing, and you had to work with the clutch, of course. And I got into that, and then my next car was a 4 on the floor, and I've just come to prefer stick shift.
Yeah, we have our 2 cars, because this is now a thing, because a lot of automatic cars in the past, there's an order to the gears. You know, you have park, reverse, drive, neutral, low, or something like that. But now one of my cars, my electric car, to go reverse, I have to push forward and then left. And pulling towards me, one notch is drive. And now I've gotten in other cars and grabbed the shifter, particularly if it's on a column, and I on the steering wheel column, and I'll pull it down 1 gear like I do in the car I normally drive, thinking I'm going forward, and I start going backwards. And so I was like, oh, that's annoying. I have to actually pay attention to which car I'm in because I'm going to end up backing into something I don't mean to.
Yeah, our electric car has a dial.
Oh, nice. Does that works okay once you get used to it?
Forward to reverse, and that just seems wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't have that feel like a lot of electric cars have creep, where if you don't push down the gas or the brake, it'll slowly move forward. Does the car have that?
Yeah, we programmed it so that it would.
Oh, okay, because you had an option.
Yeah.
Does it have one pedal driving, where when you lift your foot off the gas, it starts to slow down?
It does. But that's also the regenerative braking, and we programmed that into it as well.
Excellent. Because mine, with the gear shifter, I can change that in a second. And it's really neat because, like, if you're driving behind somebody and they suddenly stop, but I'm lifting my foot off the gas, the car is already aggressively slowing down before I can even get my foot over to the brake. And I'm like, you could come into one of those situations where that extra half a second or a quarter of a second makes all the difference between you hitting a car at 30 miles an hour versus 5. Makes a big difference. So I think that's a nice safety touch.
Yeah, but it's a different experience. With just having a dial shifter, I mean, like your automatic transmission was still a stick, and so it would be easier for older people, to transition into an electric car if you still had a stick on there. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the fun of driving a stick shift anymore. Everything's going electric, as it should.
Yeah, it's kind of a matter of time. I think we are now pretty much at the inflection point where, for most people, now it does take a little extra effort, but for most people, an electric car is going to be sufficient and work and actually save them money and repairs and fuel.
Yeah, and just the fact that there's no maintenance.
Yeah.
When I look at all of the cars that I've had, and usually they've been used. Well, matter of fact, every car I've ever had has always been used. My wife buys new cars. I always get used ones.
Yeah.
And I've had several that have blown up or broken down, usually from the same kind of failures, and transmission problem, or the radiator is a huge one. I mean, I lost 3 cars over a dysfunctional thermostat.
Yeah.
So you're driving down the highway, everything's fine. You don't realize that your engine's overheating until you wonder, why is the heater not working?
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize it's because your engine is glowing and it's now cracked.
Yeah, and you're done. You're done. There's not. Yeah, so everything can break, and the funny thing is, people will ask me about if I'm worried about the batteries catching on fire. I'm like, gasoline burns, right? I mean, it's just. I've seen over my life the nice car that catches on fire in a parking lot, and my favorite thing is when the firemen come. They have a special tool for car fires it's actually a hose. And the top of it is shaped like a pickaxe that you would use to go mining with the Seven Dwarfs or something, and they slam that thing into the hood or a panel or whatever of the car, and then they turn on the water, and it shoots water inside the compartments of the car. Absolutely amazing tool, but yeah, gasoline cars catch on fire too. Just, something to be avoided in all cars, but...
What I really liked about when we found out that electric cars were not only competitive with gasoline cars, but actually have this thing about instant torque.
Oh,
instant torque. So in a gasoline car, you have to rev up your engine. When the light changes, you rev it up, dump the clutch, and then so you have to have up to a certain amount of RPMs in order to get the power. And you have the power band. You have these gears that you have to shift through because you have to keep the RPMs of the engine in this power band where it generates the most power.
Yeah.
Electric car doesn't have any of that. There's no radiator. There's no solenoid to brake. There's no what is it? There's no what is it? Thermostat. There's no thermostat to go back. You don't have to. There's no oil.
Yep.
There's
no spark plugs.
Transmission. What transmission? Everything that ever broke down on any of the cars I've had before, none of those things exist on this. But what it does have is stupid amount of horsepower. Because look at some of the electric cars you can get right now. How easy is it to get 700 or 800 horses?
Yeah.
So they're finally coming, but you have that instant torque thing, which is just amazing. People were telling me, I was in San Francisco, I was in the subway in San Francisco, and I was listening to these people talk about how electric cars will never be successful because they're not as powerful as gasoline engines.
What?
I pointed at the train in the subway. I said, "You realize that's electric, right?"
Yeah.
And it's got 80 people on it. Now watch how fast it takes off.
It zips.
Yeah. Well, now you just got to have a battery that'll do it. Yeah. Well, now we've got that.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to see, and this is unfortunate, I was really wanting to see if you got something that is all electric, doesn't have a drive shaft, doesn't have a transmission, you don't need a differential. When you have a four-wheel drive like my Jeep, the reason I bought that was so that I could go, off-road and go fossil hunting in wilderness areas. So you have, if you made an all-electric version of what I have, and my Jeep is on 37-inch tires. I've looked at the Tesla Cybertruck and the Rivian.
No,
and a couple others.
Yeah, they're not.
None of them. They say that it is not possible to put 37-inch tires on those trucks.
What's your clearance on your Jeep? 18 inches? 14 inches?
I actually haven't measured it.
Okay, but is it something like that?
It's up there.
Because some electric cars, to keep the wind resistance tight, you have 2-3 inch clearance. You're not going off road in that.
Yeah, well, see, but this is what an electric car can do better than a gasoline engine. So now think about you go out and meet Gomer and Cletus, and you give them an electric truck, electric 4-wheel drive. And I would have to design it because we've seen what happens when nerds design trucks. They get a Cybertruck.
Yeah.
So, but I want something that can. I want more versatile type of vehicle. I want something where I can take the roof off and take the doors off, like I can with my Jeep.
No, I
want something that has fold down seats and a fold out bed. I want something that it can be one truck can be everything for whoever.
I thought Jeep was coming out with an electric vehicle.
They have a hybrid.
That's not the same.
Yeah. So it's like the worst of both worlds.
Let's see, Jeep electric car.
Yeah. So what they ought to do, because you have the instant torque, it would be the most awesome off-road vehicle. You don't have to jack it up so high because you don't have the engine, you don't have the transmission, the differential. The differential is the thing that takes up all your clearance. But with an electric car, that's gone.
It says here at caranddriver.com, Jeep Wrangler Magneto. 100% EV. So we'll see. But it's a Wrangler. It's not like a Jeep.
Well, that's what I have as a Wrangler. I've got a Wrangler X.
Oh, maybe I just don't know what the fuck I'm talking about because I'm looking at the pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, mine came factory with 30-inch tires and 373 gearing. When I bought it, it had 35s on it, and the 35s were in bad shape. They had to come off immediately. I'm like, oh gosh darn, I have to go out and buy 37-inch tires.
How much does a 37-inch tire cost?
Well, I got them for $250 each.
No, that doesn't seem too horrible.
Yeah, they're normally more.
See, I'm used to replacing Prius tires, which are $50. each. I would tell somebody that, I had all 4 of my tires changed, and I was kind of pissed off because I was out over $200, and they're like, per tire? And I go, no, for all 4. And they're like, how is that even possible? It's a small tire.
Mine are mud tires too. So they're kind of aggressive looking.
That's very nice.
One of the problems with that is I'm driving around in a stick shift, as you know, and I've got the 37-inch tires, but I'm still on 373 gears. So starting out in first feels like starting out in second.
Okay.
Got no torque off the low end, and I can't get into 6th gear either. I've got a 6-speed transmission, but I can't get into 6 when I'm going down the freeway. There's 0 torque. I get into 6, but it'll actually go slower.
Does it go slower when the engine whines because it's going too fast, too many RPMs?
No, because the ratios with the oversized tires changes all the gear ratios. So I have to have it re-geared.
Yeah, you're not going to do that.
On Tuesday, my truck will be re-geared with 513s. And
very nice.
It'll be a much different beast then.
Well, very good. Is there anything that we haven't covered that we should throw in here at the last minute?
Well, I was just going to say that if you built a truck like what I was talking about, and you give a sample of that to a couple of guys who are used to driving, big 4-wheel drive trucks,
right,
and they're used to paying $3 a gallon,
right?
Or what was it? 3 mpg, 3 miles a gallon.
Yeah.
You give them this where they can charge it up at home, and instead of having 300 horses, they have 800 horses. They've got 200 horses per tire.
Right.
And instant torque. And it costs 13 cents a minute or 10 cents a minute to charge the thing. And you got a 250-mile range. These guys would never go back to internal combustion again.
Because if you did that on an off-road vehicle, what you would do is put in 4 drive motors. So you'd have 1 motor per wheel, completely independent 4-wheel drive, not with a differential or anything like that, just completely independent 4-wheel drive, all of them with 100%, or there's almost always a limit because 100% torque could, in some cars, if the engine's big enough, the electric motor's big enough, over-torque the shaft and damage the car. But a lot of torque.
We don't have a shaft here.
Well, I mean, direct connect, you have a lot of power right at 0, and that would be great for rock climbing.
I had a friend had a Plymouth Roadrunner with the the old 70s classic Plymouth, like 1971 Plymouth Roadrunner, beautiful car, had giant tires on the back and everything, and he sets it up for drag race gearing. I think he had 411s and everything, and he's got a huge 440 6-pack in the front, and he goes to take off and turned his drive shaft into a Tootsie Roll or a Twizzler.
Yeah, Twizzler. Oh my goodness!
But now we can have twice that much horsepower and no drive shaft.
Yeah, something's still going to get torqued, so you gotta keep an eye on everything. But very good, Aron. Thank you so much for spending some time. It's been great catching up, and of course, some of my listeners will love more EV talk. Others will be bored out of their minds, and they can let me know. Phil at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. Once again, Aron, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure, sir. Good to talk to you again.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
As always, thank you so much for listening to the show. And it's, again, my apologies for taking so long to get the next episode out. But keep in mind, I'm not doing 20-minute episodes here. What this thing's going to be, probably with the bumpers and little interludes, a good hour and a half, 90 minutes of stuff that can take me anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. All combined, from the editing to coming up with topics, doing a little research, talking to great guests, and not even counting reading their books from time to time when I have book authors on. So I hope you enjoy it, and you can help me a little bit, just a little bit, with 2 different things. If you don't really have any money, that's cool. You don't have to send me any money. But I would love it if you go to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leave a 5-star review. Give some kind of good rationale why you like the show. And it makes the show actually look legitimate when someone goes and looks and says, oh my gosh, this guy actually has reviews. About a year ago, I was at it had to be over a year ago because it was pre-COVID, in the before time. I was at a conference, not skeptical or atheistic conference, just some investment people. And I mentioned that I had a podcast, and someone pulls it up on their iPhone, and they're like, oh my God, you have hundreds of reviews. It's like, that's an actual show. That's kind of cool. So that helps. That does. The other thing you can do is, of course, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Phil, and you can give $1 there or more. The top tier is $6.66, and that's per episode. It's not weekly, so if I skip a week or I'm a little slow getting shows out, it doesn't cost you anything. You only pay when shows are actually loaded there and available for you to listen to. You do get the show a day before everyone else, so that's the perk. You don't really get anything else, and I don't really want to offer anything else because then I've got to put it in my filings for the government. So you get it a day early. I did actually have a show that was a special announcement about some of my thoughts that was only put out to patrons that the general public did not get to hear for a couple of months. And I may do that again in the future. So I guess those are the perks. Those are the perks other than saying, hey, Phil, thank you for making the content. Speaking of thanking people, I have gotten recently many new patrons. Thank you all for signing up and kicking in a few dollars. And several of them were $6.66. That's my favorite. It's just kind of a wink and a nod between you and me. It's just you, and it's just me. And you're saying, hey, Phil, I like the show. I benefit from it. Others should listen to it. And I appreciate all the time you spend making the show. So that's really all I've got for today. And I have a big pile of other stuff I've got to do. And, I guess I'm going to go do that. If you have ideas or topics that you want covered in the show, again, my email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. I might be at the FFRF conference this fall in Boston. However, at this time, they have not formally declared whether they're going forward or not with an in-person conference because it is 5, maybe 6 months away. I'm hoping they'll give it the green light and we keep doing better with COVID and vaccinations, but I don't know yet. So that's subject to change, but my intent is to go to that conference and see so many of you wonderful people in Boston later this fall in 2021. So I do hope to see you out there somewhere on the road where we can see each other person to person. Until then, ciao.
Christian side, that Christian side. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider. Filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. We be walking like, we be talking like, we be side hugging every day and night. It's how we do, boo. This ain't no club, so don't be hating on me when I show them love. We living holy, it ain't no thing. So put your hands in the air and let that shoulder hang. I'm going global, cause you don't know me. I'm buying babies like Angelina Jolie. So quit that hugging and slow down, mama. And hit my fist like President Obama. That Democratic ship in the Congress. Rebook. Democratic ship in the Congress. Rebook. Democratic ship in the Congress. Rebook. Oh, give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider. Filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider. Filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. I'm a married man. You know I can't hold hands. Front hug all day long with no other demands. But I ask for all of you until you say I do. No front hugging or PDA or your EG time is through. But some of y'all are slick. Try to pull this trick. Your hug starts from the side, but soon it turns legit. So if you end up here, then go ahead and scream it. When I hug people, I leave room for the Holy Spirit. If a girl walks up with her arms spread wide, and she's front hug down without looking her eye, you better turn to the side, pat her on the back. Jesus never hugged. Buddy like that, screaming. Give me that Christian side hug. That Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side